My cheating wife panicked as I exposed her affair with my business partner in front of key investors. It was supposed to be the turning point in my life, a moment of success, but instead it became the beginning of my undoing. The room fell into a deafening silence. Sarah, my wife, stood frozen, her face drained of color as the weight of my accusation hung in the air. Her eyes darted nervously to David, my best friend and business partner, who sat next to her. The people around us, the investors, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Everything I had built, everything I had trusted, was crashing down in front of me. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was business too. For as long as I could remember, I had always been drawn to architecture. It wasn't just a career choice. It was my passion, my calling. Ever since I was a child, I'd spent hours sketching designs of buildings that captured my imagination. I earned my degree, spent years honing my skills, and eventually started my own firm. The dream was always bigger than just creating buildings. It was about crafting spaces that inspired others, that changed lives. Sarah, the woman I had married, was by my side from the beginning. She believed in my vision, supported my dreams, and helped me build the firm into something successful. Together, we were unstoppable, or so I thought. David, who had been my closest friend since college, joined our firm early on. We became a team. He was more than just a business partner. He was like a brother to me. We shared everything, from personal struggles to professional triumphs. There was no room for doubt in my mind about the trust we had in each other. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. Sarah started acting distant, leaving me to wonder if it was just the pressures of the business or if something more was going on. And then there was David, always there for support, always encouraging me. But I began noticing the small things. The way he looked at Sarah when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way they both seemed uncomfortable around each other. The tension built slowly, like a storm gathering on the horizon. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I began to question everything. Everything I had built. Everything I had believed in. Was this the cost of success? The price of ambition? And then it happened. A routine meeting with key investors turned into a moment of revelation. The firm had just secured a major deal that could change everything. The kind of deal that would define my career, put us on the map. I had prepared for months, fine-tuning every presentation, making sure every detail was perfect. But as I stood before the investors, something felt off. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I could sense Sarah and David avoiding eye contact with me. My gut told me that something was wrong, something more than just business. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched them exchange a quick, guilty glance. It was all I needed to finally confront them. In a split second, I decided to lay everything bare. I turned to Sarah and David, my voice trembling but determined. "Is there something you two need to tell me?" I asked, my eyes narrowing as I saw the truth unfold. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Sarah looked as though she might collapse, while David stood there, unable to meet my gaze. My suspicions had been right all along. "Is it true?" I pressed on. "Have you two been having an affair?" The words left my mouth, but they didn't seem real. It was as if I was watching someone else's life fall apart, not my own. But the reality was undeniable. Sarah finally opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. She was trembling, her lips quivering, unable to deny the truth any longer. David, who had always been the pillar of strength in my life, now seemed like a ghost of the man I once knew. His expression was a mix of guilt, shame, and something else, fear. It took him a moment, but he finally spoke. "It's true," he said, barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, man. I never meant for it to happen." The investors who had been waiting in silence were now visibly uncomfortable. Their murmurs grew louder as they began to shift in their seats. I had no idea what was happening in their minds, but I knew one thing for sure. The deal was ruined. The trust that had held our company together was shattered in an instant. The moment felt surreal. Everything I had worked for, everything I had trusted, had been betrayed. Sarah, my wife, the woman I had loved and built a life with, was the one who had hurt me the most. But David's betrayal cut deeper. He was supposed to be my partner, my friend, the one person I could count on no matter what. And now the reality of it all sank in. I was alone. The silence in the room felt suffocating. My mind raced as I tried to process what had just unfolded. The betrayal wasn't just a personal wound. It had shattered everything I had worked so hard to build. I looked around the room at the investors, who had witnessed the chaos in front of them, their expressions a mix of discomfort and disappointment. The deal that had promised to change the trajectory of our firm was now nothing but a lost opportunity. I could feel Sarah's gaze on me, but I refused to meet her eyes. How could I? The woman I had married, who I had trusted with every part of my heart, had torn everything apart with a single betrayal. The pain felt like a physical blow to my chest. I had loved her. I thought I still did. But the truth was undeniable. David, too, stood motionless beside her, his face etched with guilt. His apology earlier had been weak, empty even. It wasn't enough. I had invested so much in our friendship, in our partnership, and this was how it ended. The investors filed out one by one, their murmurs fading as they exited the room, leaving behind the wreckage of a failed meeting. The damage was done. My reputation, our firm's future, everything I had hoped for, it all seemed to crumble into dust before my eyes. Sarah, finally breaking the silence, tried to approach me, but I stepped back, raising a hand to stop her. Her voice wavered as she spoke, almost pleading. Please, just let me explain. But how could I even begin to listen? The truth had been laid bare in front of me. Every word she could say now would only add more layers to the lie that had already consumed everything. I swallowed hard, my throat tight with emotion, and turned away from her, walking to the window. The view of the city, once full of promise and hope, now felt distant and cold. David stepped forward, his face full of regret. I never wanted this to happen, he said quietly, but I didn't turn around to face him. There was nothing he could say that would undo the damage. I'm sorry, man. I can't take back what I did, but you need to know it was never about you. It doesn't matter. I cut him off, my voice rough. It's too late for apologies. It's over. I stood there staring out at the skyline, but all I could see were the pieces of my life scattered across the floor, irreparably broken. It wasn't just the betrayal of trust, it was the destruction of everything I had believed in. In a single moment, everything had changed, and I couldn't escape the feeling that I was somehow to blame. Had I missed the signs? Was I so blinded by ambition, by the success of the firm, that I had failed to notice the cracks in my own life? As the weight of it all settled in, the anger started to rise. Anger at Sarah, at David, at myself. But underneath the anger was a deeper feeling, one of grief. I grieved the loss of something I never thought I would lose. The idea of a perfect life. The future I had imagined was gone, shattered like glass. Sarah left quietly, her steps echoing in the empty office as she disappeared into the hallway. I didn't watch her go. Instead, I sank into the chair behind my desk, rubbing my temples as I tried to make sense of the chaos. My hands shook as I tried to steady myself, but nothing seemed to work. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the walls growing tighter with every passing second. David lingered for a moment longer, his shadow falling across the floor. I'll step down, he finally said, his voice almost too quiet to hear. From the firm, I'll leave. You can have it all. I laughed bitterly. It doesn't matter anymore, David. Nothing matters. He nodded, not bothering to argue. The firm, the life I had worked so hard to build, didn't seem like it would survive the fallout. My entire foundation had been cracked, and I had no idea how to put it all back together. David left soon after, and I was alone. The silence in the office was deafening, alone with my thoughts, alone with the consequences of my actions, or perhaps the consequences of trusting the wrong people. It was hard to tell anymore. Days passed and the firm's future hung in the balance. My calls went unanswered, and I could see the way people began to look at me, differently, cautiously. The whispers had already started, and I knew that in this world of business, rumors spread faster than facts. The investors had pulled out, and the board members were already talking about possible leadership changes. My name, once synonymous with success, was now linked to scandal. I spent my days in the office, barely speaking to anyone, just trying to keep things afloat. I couldn't bring myself to look at the blueprints we had been working on, the ones that were supposed to be our crowning achievement. Every design felt like a reminder of my failure. Then came the inevitable confrontation. Sarah reached out to me, but I ignored her calls. I couldn't bring myself to talk to her. Not yet. When we finally did meet, I could see the hollow desperation in her eyes. "I've left him," she said, her voice cracking. "I know what I did was wrong. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right." I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to scream at her, to demand why she had done it, but instead I said nothing. There were no words left for us. David had already taken his leave, and now Sarah was offering her own form of reconciliation. But it felt too little, too late. She had destroyed everything I held dear, my trust, my love, my business. And now as she stood before me, asking for forgiveness, I could only shake my head. "It's over," I said softly, the words heavy with finality. "It's all over." The days blurred into weeks as I sat in the same office, surrounded by the remnants of what used to be. The firm was in shambles, and my personal life was no better. The emptiness in my chest seemed to grow with every passing hour, a constant reminder of what I had lost. The phone calls had stopped coming. The emails had turned to silence. What had once been a fast-moving train toward success was now derailed and left to rust in the dust. I had always believed in the power of hard work, that with enough determination, any obstacle could be overcome. But the truth was, no amount of effort could undo the damage that had been done. My foundation, the people I had trusted most in my life, had crumbled beneath me. I had no idea how to rebuild it, or if I even could. In the evenings, when the office grew quiet and the lights dimmed, I would sit in my chair and stare at the blueprints scattered across my desk. They used to inspire me. Every line, every curve was a dream realized. But now all I could see were reminders of my failure. The phone rang one evening, cutting through the silence. I wasn't in the mood to speak to anyone, but something told me I should answer. "Hello," I said, my voice rough from lack of use. "Is this Daniel Hayes?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, yet somehow authoritative. "Yes," I replied, trying to place the tone. "Who is this?" "This is Emma Carter. I'm calling from your legal team. We need to discuss the next steps regarding the firm and the potential lawsuit from some of the investors. I've scheduled a meeting for you tomorrow at 10 a.m. My stomach twisted. A lawsuit? Of course. In the wake of the scandal, it was inevitable. I hadn't even thought about the legal ramifications, too consumed by the personal betrayal to see the bigger picture. "All right," I said, my mind already racing through the possibilities. "I'll be there." The call ended, and I stared at the phone for a moment, not sure what to feel. Anger? Frustration? Or just numbness at the relentless spiral my life had become? The next day, I arrived at the legal office early, the weight of the world pressing down on me. Emma Carter, a sharp and confident attorney, greeted me as I entered the conference room. She was calm, professional, everything I wasn't at that moment. "We've gathered the details," she began, laying out a series of documents before me. "The investors are unhappy, to say the least. They filed a claim for damages, arguing that your personal issues have affected their trust in the firm." I could feel the heat rise in my chest. They're using my personal life against me? After everything I've done for them? Emma nodded. "Unfortunately, yes. It's not uncommon in cases like this, but we'll do everything we can to minimize the damage." I ran my hands through my hair, frustrated. How did it all go so wrong? Emma's expression softened for a moment, but only briefly. "People make mistakes. The important thing now is how you move forward." That simple phrase, the most cliché, yet the most real, resonated in my mind long after the meeting was over. "How do I move forward?" I whispered to myself as I walked out of the office, back into the chaos of my life. The truth was, I didn't know. There were days when I felt like giving up entirely, when the pain of it all seemed unbearable, when the world felt like it was conspiring against me. But then there were moments, brief flashes, when I remembered what had driven me in the first place. My passion for architecture, my dream to create something meaningful, something lasting. But the road to healing was long and uncertain. I had no choice but to face the truth. My life had been turned upside down, and I was the one who had to pick up the pieces. I began with the simplest of things, taking long walks in the park, allowing myself to breathe without the weight of the world pressing on my shoulders. The fresh air, the chirping of birds. It was a small reminder that there was still beauty in the world, that there was still a future to look forward to. But it wasn't just nature that helped me cope. It was also the support of a few key people. My family had been silent at first, unsure of how to approach me in the aftermath of the scandal. But as the weeks passed, they slowly reached out. My mother, who had always been my biggest cheerleader, called me one evening, her voice gentle but firm. "Daniel, I know this is hard, but you can't let this define you. You're stronger than this. We all believe in you." Her words, though simple, gave me a glimmer of hope. Maybe I could still rebuild my life. Maybe I could still find a way to move forward, no matter how impossible it seemed. David had disappeared after the betrayal, but one day out of the blue I received a message from him. The words were brief, but there was sincerity in them. "I'm sorry for everything. If you need to talk, I'm here." I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind him of the pain he had caused. But another part of me, the part that still held on to the hope of some form of reconciliation, simply nodded and put the phone down. Time had a way of dulling the sharp edges of pain, but the scars would remain. The next few months were a blur of legal battles and attempts to salvage what was left of the firm. But amidst the chaos, I began to rebuild, starting with myself. I attended therapy, leaned on my family, and slowly started to regain some semblance of peace. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the weight of everything seemed too much to bear. But every small victory, every new design I started, every project I completed was a step in the right direction. It wasn't just about regaining my success. It was about rediscovering who I was, beyond the firm, beyond the betrayal. And slowly but surely, I began to realize something important. I wasn't defined by my past. The mistakes, the betrayals, the failures, they didn't have to be the end of my story. They were just chapters, part of the journey. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could face it. As I sat alone in my office that evening, the weight of everything pressing down on me felt unbearable. The walls of the space I had worked so hard to build, the same space that was supposed to reflect my dreams and aspirations, now felt suffocating. I was used to solving problems, but this was beyond anything I had ever prepared for. The betrayal from Sally, someone I had trusted with both my business and my heart, cut deeper than I could have imagined. David had always been the one I turned to for advice. But after everything that had unfolded, I found myself questioning everyone around me. My partner in both work and life had turned out to be someone entirely different from who I thought she was. Sally's affair with David had shattered not just my relationship with her, but also with the people I had trusted the most. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that gnawed at my insides, and it left me feeling empty, directionless. I had spent years building my architectural firm, cultivating relationships with clients, and positioning myself as a leader in the field. Yet at the most critical moment, everything was crumbling. The investors who had supported me, the clients who relied on my vision, all of them were now questioning my ability to lead. I had to make the hard decision to distance myself from Sally and David, both professionally and personally. The partnership with David was over, and although I knew it was necessary for the business's survival, it didn't make it any easier. In the quiet of my office, I took a long breath, trying to calm the storm within me. I had spent too much of my life building up a reputation, a legacy that was now at risk. The investors' eyes were sharp, their expectations high. They wanted results, and they didn't care about the drama unfolding behind the scenes. The pressure was immense, but for the first time in weeks I allowed myself to be angry, not just at Sally or David, but at myself for being so blind to the truth. I knew I had to rise above it. I had to prove not just to the investors, but also to myself that I was capable of more. I couldn't let this betrayal define me. As I stared out the window of my office, the city lights twinkling below, I made a vow to push forward. I would rebuild, but this time I would do it with a clear understanding of who I could trust and who I couldn't. It wasn't long before I started to regain my focus. I knew I had to make some tough calls to repair the damage. First, I gathered the remaining members of my team, those who still believed in my vision and were committed to moving forward. It was time to lay out a new plan, one that would ensure the future of the company despite the recent upheavals. The first step was to meet with the investors. I scheduled a meeting, knowing full well that they were skeptical after the scandal. When I entered the room, I was met with their cold, expectant stares. They had no interest in hearing excuses or apologies. They wanted results, and that was the only thing I could offer them. I stood in front of them, confident despite the storm inside me, and laid out a new vision for the company. I made it clear that while the past few weeks had been difficult, I was committed to moving forward. I explained the changes I had made, including severing ties with Sally and David, and assured them that I was in control. It was a hard sell, but as I spoke, I could feel myself regaining a sense of power that had been stripped from me. I was no longer the victim of betrayal. I was the one in charge of my destiny. As the meeting ended, I could see the investors' faces soften slightly. They were still wary, but they had seen the resolve in my eyes. They knew that I was a man who would do whatever it took to make things right. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but I was prepared to fight for the future of my company. The next step was to meet with my team and give them a clear direction moving forward. I reassured them that we would push through the difficulties and continue to create great work. It wasn't just about the business. It was about our collective purpose. We would rebuild, and this time, it would be stronger than ever. If you've enjoyed this journey and want more gripping stories like this, don't forget to hit subscribe. Let me know where you're tuning in from. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay tuned for more, and remember, the best is yet to come.